We have been following lectionary, so don't you find it kind of interesting that the passage for today is basically the same passage that we read from Mark, the feeding of the 5,000 last week? As a matter of fact, this is one of those stories that is found in all the Gospels, each Gospel telling with their own nuances and highlights. So do you remember about Mark's? What was it about Mark's that was different? What was unique to Mark last time? What did Mark start off doing? Remember when Jesus went, he started off doing what to the people? Did you listen? No? Were you here? No. He started off teaching. Remember they came and he had compassion on them and he started teaching. And he taught a long time and then it started getting dark and then the disciples said to Jesus what? In Mark. The disciples said to Jesus in Mark what? Send them home. We don't have enough food. It's getting dark. Let them go get it themselves. Send them home. In our passage for today, the very first thing that John wants us to know, and I'm not going to really get into it, that's another sermon for another time, is that he tells you what time of the year it is, what's getting ready to go on. Passover. So what does that mean? Couple things. It means that people are becoming to start to get to Jerusalem. It also means that John wants you to kind of look at this story and then also remember the Passover and the Exodus and kind of there's some comparison going on that. So there's some stuff going on there. At the very beginning, Jesus says, he doesn't start teaching them at the very beginning. He asked the question. And what does he say to them? How are we going to do what? He says, how are we going to feed all these people? And the scripture says, he already knows how we're going to do it, but he just wants to see what the disciples are going to do. So, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, tells him what? Tells him that there's a boy that has 5 loaves and 2 fish. And so they use that, and at the end, this is also different in John and not in Mark. Jesus knows what they want to do. Jesus knows that they want to make him king, so he gets away before they can do it. In both Gospels, they go into, if you noticed here, the walking on the water, very different from other Gospels. In John's, it's very short. If you grew up in the church, or if you have been a scholar of the Bible, or if you've read through the Bible, if you had to talk about stories, my guess is that it's John's version of the feeding of the 5,000 that you know, because John is the only one who mentions the boy. The others talk about the bread and the fish, but John is the only one that says it's a boy that has the bread and the fish. Interesting is the boy who provides the means for Jesus to perform the miracle, the feeding of all those who had come that day to hear him. Just having spent 2 weeks with the youth, first with the middle school at the Cedar Church Challenge to Change, and then with Montreat Youth Conference, I was not surprised that it was a kid, a youth, a child who stepped up. For me, that has been the theme of my summer, and it is one that we adults need to be reminded of from time to time, lest we forget the importance of our children and youth in our church, in our lives, and in our world. They have much to teach us with their words and their action. So today, you're going to have to deal with how I'm going to do worship with the sermon. I want to show you, Rick's back there, woohoo! We're going to show you a clip. At the very beginning is a few pictures of the Challenge to Change, and then there's some pictures of Montreat. And for you that don't know, this is a Challenge to Change was a mission conference, and Montreat is a youth conference. So I want to share some of my insights that I gained in my ventures with our amazing youth. First, with the Cedar Kirk's Challenge to Change, because there weren't many of us, we got together with 2 other youth groups to do some work at Bethel. And every morning we would get up early, we would go and fix our lunch for the day, we would eat our breakfast, and then we would head off to Bethel. Bethel is a migrant farm workers community. We did several different things. One of the things that we did there was that they have bags. On Tuesdays, they give out food to the neighbors and the people on the migrant farm workers who come, and we gave out bags. We filled about 700 bags. After filling smaller bags of beans and rice, we filled the bags with beans and rice, and then there was vegetables and fruits. Also, when the day came on Tuesdays, is when they give out these bags. They also give out some paper products, and they give out meat, and they'll give out lots of local Paneras, and I think maybe Sam's and Publix and some other places give some of their stuff that's outdated, that it's fresh, but you just can't sell it there anymore, so they'll give out pastries and breads. And so we did that for about 700. They told us the week before there had been 900 people there to get a grocery bag full of food. We also, Bethel also offers their services, and they're now building a dental clinic. So they're taking people who would like to volunteer, who are dentists, who would like to come and give a little bit of their time. They have a health clinic, and one of the things that we worked on is they're going to have a legal clinic, so that people who need some help, have questions, they can come in and they can get legal services there. And what we did there, which was it was a lot of fun because the kids actually got to do it. We took down the whole side of the building was rotting, so they got to take down the side, and then they got to put up new stuff and paint over it. So they got to actually see what was going on. One day, we were happy working there, but one day, Javier, I don't know if you remember Javier, who works for Bethel, he came and spoke here one time. Javier has been at Bethel for a very long time. And he was right. He wanted the youth to see what happens, what they do during the daytime. And so one day we stopped early and we packed up food and things to take out to a local farm where there were people out there working. And so we packed a lunch, we packed drinks, and we also packed some extra things for them to go and take home with them. And while we were there, it was around 11:30, 12. If you've been outside around 11:30 or 12 lately, it is very hot. We weren't really doing a whole lot, and the kids, and the adults too, we were feeling the heat. And then we didn't even have to say anything, and they would look at us and say, "Now, how long have these people been out here?" And we would tell them, probably since about 6 o'clock, so probably 5-6 hours. And we didn't have to say anything. They got it. They understood what the hard work they were putting it in. The challenge to change is to open our eyes and to see and to make a difference, as the little boy did. The theme for the Montreat Youth Conference this year was Lift Up Your Voice, and each day a different voice was highlighted and talked about. We started off talking about listening for God's voice, and then the distracting voices in our lives. Then the next day was the youth's voice, and then silenced, not silent, but silenced voices. And finally, on Friday, we talked about united voices together. They talked about the themes in small groups and in keynote and at nightly worship. As I read this passage, I thought about our youth and children and what it is they have to offer us. One of the amazing things about youth is they have the ability to dream and hope beyond the accepted norms. You see, in this story for today, the little boy saw possibilities, not puniness, in those 5 loaves and 2 fish. Reminding the disciples they should be looking for ways to succeed and not looking for excuses to fail. I had to think about my own self and how often I and other adults have underestimated our kids and our children and our youth's ability. We neglect to listen to their ideas or get their input, and they have good ideas, and input. What would have happened if Andrew had simply dismissed the boy's gift as worthless? Oh, he's just a little boy with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. I mean, what can he really offer? How would Jesus have fed the crowd? Makes you stop and think, doesn't it? For all of those who are fans of Animal House, this is the 40th anniversary of Animal House, and I'm going to quote John Belushi. I never thought that I would quote John Belushi in church, but I am. He said this: "Nothing is impossible for the person who will not listen to reason." Kids have figured this out. Adults, we're not good at that. If it doesn't make sense, we don't do it. If it's not reasonable, why waste our effort? Remember, who was the only one to step forward and volunteer to fight that Goliath? It wasn't any of the adults. At Montreat, I enjoyed it all, but I think I probably got the most out of when we did the keynote, just because I'm sitting there taking notes, and one of the things that they did at Montreat is they shared a TED Talk. And it's about a young girl who is 10 years old, and I think she's the youngest person to give a talk to this group and on one of the TED Talks. Her name is Adora Silvac, and it's entitled "What Adults Can Learn from Kids." When she did this, it was back in 2010, and she's at one of the universities, Berkeley maybe, in California. So what I want to do is I want to show you a snippet from the TED Talk, but I'm going to do as Aram did as well. I'm going to make a disclaimer. It's not political. She makes a little dig at somebody at the very beginning, but other than that, it's not meant to. I want you to listen to her. Listen to what she has to say. Let's see if Rick can get this going. See if he gets paid this week.
Now, I wanted to start with the question, when was the last time you were called childish? For kids like me, being called childish can be a frequent occurrence. Every time we make irrational demands, exhibit irresponsible behavior, or display any other signs of being normal American citizens, we are called childish. Which really bothers me. After all, take a look at these events. Imperialism and colonization, world wars, George W. Bush. Ask yourself, who's responsible? Adults. Now, what have kids done? Well, Anne Frank touched millions with her powerful account of the Holocaust. Ruby Bridges helped to end segregation in the United States. And most recently, Charlie Simpson helped to raise 120,000 pounds for Haiti on his little bike. So as you can see evidenced by such examples, age has absolutely nothing to do with it. The traits the word childish addresses are seen so often in adults that we should abolish this age discriminatory word when it comes to criticizing behavior associated with irresponsibility and irrational thinking. Thank you. Then again, who's to say that certain types of irrational thinking aren't exactly what the world needs? Maybe you've had grand plans before, but stopped yourself thinking, that's impossible, or that costs too much, or that won't benefit me. For better or worse, we kids aren't hampered as much when it comes to thinking about reasons why not to do things. Kids can be full of inspiring aspirations and hopeful thinking, like my wish that no one went hungry or that everything were free, kind of utopia. How many of you still dream like that and believe in the possibilities? Sometimes a knowledge of history and the past failures of utopian ideals can be a burden, because you know that if everything were free, then the food stocks would become depleted and scarce and lead to chaos. On the other hand, we kids still dream about perfection, and that's a good thing, because in order to make anything a reality, you have to dream about it first. In many ways, our audacity to imagine helps push the boundaries of possibility. For instance, the Museum of Glass in Tacoma, Washington, my home state, yoo-hoo, Washington, has a program called Kids Design Glass, and kids draw their own ideas for glass art. Now, the resident artist said that they got some of their best ideas from the program because kids don't think about the limitations of how hard it can be to blow glass into certain shapes. They just think of good ideas. Now, when you think of glass, you might think of colorful chihuly designs or maybe Italian vases, but kids challenge glass artists to go beyond that into the realm of broken-hearted snakes and bacon boys, who you can see as meat vision. Now, our inherent wisdom doesn't have to be insider's knowledge. Kids already do a lot of learning from adults, and we have a lot to share. I think that adults should start learning from kids. Now, I do most of my speaking in front of an education crowd.
Unless you want to listen to another 5 minutes of it. I think not. We adults can actually learn from our children and youth. They don't think about limitations, if you heard there, or failures, or whether it makes sense or not. They dream big, even audaciously, and see possibilities where we often can't or won't. They are free to imagine and to create without restrictions. Sometimes they even color outside of the lines. They are able to see endless opportunities. For them, the sky's the limit. And as we saw in our story, children and youth can even save the day if we are open to them and treat their presence and input with respect and dignity that they deserve. Their voices matter. Not later when they're grown up, but now with the gift that they have to give us. There's a story I came upon about a woman and her 3-year-old daughter who repeatedly asked to be left alone with her newborn baby brother. Afraid of the possibility of sibling rivalry, the mother consulted a therapist to ask if she should acquiesce to the child's request. After being assured that the 3-year-old was not aggressive and was well adjusted, the therapist thought, yeah, I think you should let your daughter have a chance to be with her baby brother. However, the therapist did suggest that the mother might want to listen in on the little intercom, just in case she was needed. So the mother took the therapist's advice and let her 3-year-old daughter go in with her new baby brother, and then she went to her room to listen on the monitor. She heard her daughter close the door to the nursery and walk over to the crib. Then after a moment, she heard her daughter say to the baby brother, baby, tell me about God. I think I'm forgetting. Tell me about God. I think we might be forgetting. You see, I think that is the gift our children and youth bless us with when we allow them to. I know that it was a gift that was blessed to me this summer, them showing me God through their eyes and through their actions. They see faith through eyes of wonder and beauty and awesomeness. They come eager with energy. They see possibilities in places that we have disregarded as unimportant and useless. They are fearless and dare to believe just because. They remind us of what is important for life and faith in our world today and in our world and their world for tomorrow. Tell me about God. They teach us. It is our gift that God has blessed us with. They are pretty amazing. Let us pray.